Good evening, everyone. I had meant to actually get this video out a few days ago, but unfortunately had some complications with my streaming software. For whatever reason, it decided it wasn't going to record the entire video, nor did it want to, in addition to not recording the entire video, it didn't want to record it at the proper frame rate or anything. So I wasn't able to get it out, and so I'm re-recording it now. So anyway, please do not take this as a legitimately valid guide, as this spec is currently not usable in game. But I kind of wanted to go over what it would look like and how it would potentially work, and even kind of show some damage comparisons between what you might consider a more standardized enhancement shaman build, which utilizes dual wield, versus a two-handed shaman build. That being said, I do want to point out that, you know, a lot of people have already pointed out that there are a few reasons why this build is not viable, could not be used, and that's simply because, again, the weapons available don't really support it. Sadly, there aren't really any good two-handed weapons available to shamans, and you know, in addition to that, it's just, you know, like I said, that's the biggest issue, is the issue with weapons. Other people have commented on the Maelstrom generation issue. It should be pointed out that I forget exactly what expansion this was in. I want to say it was Legion. I don't think it lasted throughout the entirety of Legion, or whatever expansion it was present in, but at one point shamans did have a second resource bar. They had a Maelstrom bar in addition to their mana bar, and Maelstrom actually worked in a very similar fashion as the Death Knight runic power. Of course, that's no longer the case. Hasn't been like that for some time now. Instead, Maelstrom weapon actually works as a stacking buff. And initially, you can stack up to 5 stacks of Maelstrom weapon, and there are talents that allow you to there are talents that ultimately allow you to stack up to more, stack more stacks of it. I should probably make sure I take those. And so there are a few other, you know, like I said, there are some talents that allow you to stack up to 10 Maelstrom weapon stacks. But, you know, again, it's really just, I mean, that's what it boils down to. And your Maelstrom is generated by your melee weapon strikes. So every time you use an ability or an auto attack, you have a chance to generate a stack of Maelstrom. And you'll kind of see how this actually looks and works as I, you know, kind of showcase it here. Obviously, you know, Stormbringer is only a level 50 shaman, so I've kind of gone ahead and, you know, I mean, obviously I can't utilize all the talents available yet, but this should give us a general idea of kind of what we're looking at in terms of overall damage and, you know, DPS, and we can kind of go from there. To do this, I have opted to use the Brawler's Razor Claws, as well as the Burnished Warden Staff and the Lava Dredger. each of these kind of has its own caveats, as you'll see when I kind of play around with them. There are 3 abilities in particular that I'm currently aware of that just will not work with either of the two-handed weapons currently, and one ability that's even more restrictive, requiring that would not work with a staff currently, although I do think that they could rework that because, and probably should, given the fact that staves are used as striking weapons now. In fact, they have been for some time, with the monk class in particular, using them as striking weapons. Now, again, so let's go ahead and see what this looks like in terms of some damage output and stuff. But I see I get my buffs up. Rock that Maelstrom weapon on. Rock that Maelstrom weapon. Get my Storm Strikes up. See, when I hit 10 strikes of 10, I don't even have 10 stacks. I have 5 stacks up there. And as you can see, I can actually let me get my Stormbringer procs and stuff like that going. Forceful winds. I mean, but if you actually pay attention to my Maelstrom stats, where are they? They're right here. You'll notice, I mean, you see how fast they're actually stacking. And, I'd say they're stacking pretty okay, but, again, it's just one of those situations of, I got 10 stacks of Hailstorm already. That. I forgot Hailstorm uses Frost Shot. I'm kind of forgetting, but yeah, I mean, as you can see, using this current build, which I would argue is kind of more standard build for Shaman, for Enhancement Shaman at this point, it's I would say that's pretty powerful, and honestly, I'm not going to deny. I think that looks pretty cool. Especially with the Wind Fury and the Flame Tongue weapon. But anyway, so let's actually stop the attacking here. Obviously, I didn't even put down this ability. I'm not sure if that's going to help make that faster. The thing is with two-handed enhancement, I mean, with dual wielding, I'm not really too concerned about Maelstrom generation. Like, I would say it's not stacking as fast as I think a lot of people think it does, but then again, it just depends, because sometimes you get those really, really big hits on the Maelstrom weapon, and it just stacks a lot, and it just jumps. So it's kind of hit or miss. And so, like, obviously, let's look at this. One of the big abilities I want to watch out for here is actually Crash Lightning, which, as you can see, is not really doing a whole lot anyway. And the reason I draw a lot of attention to Crash Lightning is people have pointed out that back before Shadowlands released, that Ian Hazacostas came forth and had said that they just weren't going to do two-handed enhancement Shaman. It just wasn't coming back. Now, I do find that to be a little odd, because if you actually look at the change logs for Crash Lightning, which I'll tab over to now. Okay, here's the change log. If we look at the change log, obviously Crash Lightning debuted in Legion. It was a lot more simple back in Legion. But what's important to note is if we go up here to 8.1, we can still see that clearly, even though it's more in line with what it is now, and I'll get to what it is now in just a moment, you can see that there's something interesting about this. Obviously, there's no mention to two-handed weapons in here at all. It clearly goes off your attack power plus offhand attack power, which attack power would be main hand weapon. But here's where it becomes interesting. If we go up to 9.0.1, Shadowlands, we'll notice that this is where it starts to change. If you read that, it does mention two-handed weapons. And so whether it's scaled with two-handed weapons before or not, as of 9.0.1, it definitely shows that it scales with two-handed weapons. And so I wonder why Blizzard would do that. I think that this definitely indicates that they were at least experimenting with it, but then ultimately decided not to follow through with it. But what's interesting is this is the version that ended up in the game, and this is roughly the version that's still in the game as of just 2 days ago even. As you can see, it still scales with two-handed weapons. The only major difference is that they've also added Ice Strike to it. So it now also affects your Ice Strike in addition to Storm Strike and Lava Strike. So, like I said, take that for whatever, it's worth. But to me, that tells me that Blizzard was at least experimenting with the idea of two-handed shamans. But then, like I said, ultimately decided not to move forward with it. And for whatever reason, forgot to remove that from the string of code. And the description of what the ability does. And so, as I kind of showcase the two-handed build that I have in mind, you'll kind of see how that actually impacts the build, and how ultimately, I would argue it makes no difference. The overall damage output is really the same whether you're using one hand, dual wield or two hand. And I think, it may not be identical, but this is going to be, what I'm going to show you may not be exactly identical, but the problem you have to keep in mind is I'm at a handicapped because of how Storm Strike, Wind Strike, which is the upgraded, ascended version of Storm Strike, and Doomwind's work. We can't really get 100% accurate numbers, but I'm hoping that this will at least get a little closer. Will get us pretty close to what those accurate numbers would be. But it would be interesting to see what it would look like if we had the ability to use those abilities. Let me tab back over to this. And we'll go into the full build kind of once we're done here, but let me go ahead and obviously switch specs here to, obviously I've actually got this saved as a spec. Theorycrafting spec. So let's go ahead and let's start with the staff first. Obviously, as you can see, I don't know when they changed that, but it definitely looks like Ice Strike no longer works unless you have one-handed weapons now too. Yeah, I mean that's going to be a problem, because I think when I was testing this even the other day, of course that was, I want to say, before server went live with the Drag Theater. This was actually, this was Monday night. I was testing this, and Ice Strike actually worked with two-handed weapons, if I remember correctly. So, unless I just never noticed it. So, anyway, this could be another issue here. So we'll go ahead and see what this does. Let's go over this build kind of first, and I'll go over, like I said, I'll go over the full build using Wowhead. But this will kind of give you a general idea. These are the talents I've taken. Obviously Astral Shift. It's basically the same talents on this side. I wouldn't make any real modifications to this side of the tree. It's really this side where some of those changes are. The biggest changes are obviously you're dropping Lava Lash and Molten Assault. Because those just, you're dropping these. And I'll get into this little fiasco, this issue, this ordeal here in a minute, because I've got an issue with their starter build that they actually implemented, because their starter build makes no sense. But I'll explain that in a little bit. So anyway, obviously, you know, you would take your Feral Lunge, that's going to be your gap closer. You have your Doom Winds, you have your Sunring. For the most part, it's very cut and dry, the same build, except you're dropping Lava Lash. And the reason you drop Lava Lash is because there have been some people that have pointed out, oh, just make Lava Lash work with two-handed weapon. I have an issue with this. And that issue is that my philosophy would be to keep two-handed Enhancement Shaman in as close to line as it was originally conceived. And two-handed Enhancement Shaman never used Lava Lash. In fact, it was mostly a wind-based build. You're really focused on your Wind Fury weapon procs, you're focused on your Wind Fury totem, and any other abilities that can give you that additional haste and attack speed. So, let me kind of show you how this build works. Obviously, I'm going to adjust this to kind of accommodate the fact that I don't want to push these buttons. We know they don't work, obviously, sadly. And then we'll kind of see where this goes, because obviously I think we're gonna have, since they modified this to only use one-handed weapons, I do think we're going to have a bigger issue. And obviously they've brought Ice Strike in line with Doom Winds at this point, so we might have a little bit of a bigger issue with damage than I thought, but it's because obviously we now lost another ability. So let's go ahead and see what we can do with this. Obviously we want to make sure our Wind Fury weapon is up. Yeah, obviously we have to make sure Wind Fury's on our staff. We're going to drop a Wind Fury totem. That's going to be vitally important here. I'm going to go ahead and back up, because we're going to use the Feral Lunge.
I require a target.
If it'll let me do it. So yeah. And so we'll kind of go from here. So far, I'm going to say that this is definitely a damage loss, a DPS loss. I will go back and compare the numbers again, but and look, you know, as well. But yeah, this is a major damage, simply because we're now losing Ice Strike as well, which I don't know. Basically, we have no abilities, and so yeah, it's a major loss. But like I said, I mean, a lot of this is because of the fact that we are losing 3 core abilities at this current time. I do think it's possible that if we weren't losing those 3 abilities, we wouldn't have any issues. I think, let me check some stuff in terms of making sure we're checking our Maelstrom weapon and seeing how fast Maelstrom weapon is stacking. The issue here is that missing those 3 abilities, we're really losing out on a lot of our strikes, our melee weapon strikes. And so I think that's a problem. Yeah. Well, I mean, I was gonna say, I noticed, I did notice that we are still getting some decent jumps in terms of Maelstrom. I would argue that even like this, we're not really losing our Maelstrom weapon stats. The Maelstrom weapon is stacking about as fast as it would with dueling. Again, this is not this is not, you know, by any means, you know, a good reflection on what two-handed would be. So, anyway, let's go ahead and try our mace, and as you can see, even with equipping the mace, it doesn't do us any good. Those abilities are still gone. So, let's go ahead and clear this. I mean, as we can see, we're getting about 331 DPS with this build. It's about, and that's pretty bad. I would argue 331 DPS is just horrible. But that's, again, keep in mind, I don't have the access to weapons at this level that are relatively comparative other than the air weapons. So, I mean, let's keep trying this and just see kind of what it does. I mean, obviously, it's, you know, you're hitting that flurry. So, we got some people watching that are curious as to what I'm doing here, but, I mean, that's not a bad thing. But anyway. I mean, obviously, I mean, like, let's face it, I want to say with this weapon, for whatever reason, the Maelstrom weapon box is actually quite a bit worse for some reason. Unless, you know, again, that's just the RNG. It's kind of hard. Let me see something. That might be why I don't think I had a Wind Fury weapon on the mace. But let's see kind of if this actually increases that or improves the generation, the Maelstrom generation at all. Let's see, yeah. I mean, it's just, I would say, you know, the staff is actually better when it comes to Maelstrom generation, and that doesn't make sense because both weapons are the same speed. So, unless it's just, I mean, RNG, I don't know. But I do want to say that the Maelstrom weapon was stacking faster with the staff. And obviously, I do think we actually have lower damage for some reason. I would argue we have lower damage. We have lower damage with the mace. And I think that's odd considering... Yeah, I mean, that just seems a little odd. Considering the fact that both weapons have the same, well, I was going to say have the same stats, but what it could be, I think, is the fact that the staff has higher haste, and so obviously with the higher haste, you're going to be faster. The more haste you have, the faster you're going to hit, obviously, and so that's I think definitely making the difference here. The mace has kind of a balance between critical strike and haste, and so I think the staff is a clear winner over even the mace in this case, but that's just because it's got pure haste instead of a haste crit split. So yeah, I mean the staff is a clear winner because of the haste. But let's go back to the brawler gloves just to kind of see what the difference is, because again, like I said, you are losing a lot because you're not, the game doesn't let you use 3 of your abilities. You are locked out of 3 of your abilities, and so you're gonna lose a lot of the damage. That's nice. It actually updated my action bars to reflect the change, which I like. So let's make sure I've got Flame Tongue. Let's go ahead and switch those around, make sure I've got Wind Fury on it. And so as you can see, I'm doing significantly more damage just simply by doing it, and that is to be expected. Now, I do think if we weren't losing 3 of our abilities, the damage would be relatively comparable between the 3. Because, let's go ahead and... What I will do is I will actually drop these and use just the items, just use the abilities that I... we're doing over 1,000 DPS with this build. And so what I want to do is obviously test it out without those abilities and see if there's actually an increase without those abilities. Without using those abilities. And so... but in terms of Maelstrom generation, as long as you've got the haste, I don't think it really makes a difference as long as you've got the melee haste and all of that. But I mean, I would say yeah, this is probably still doing twice as much damage. This is doing almost twice the damage as the other build. So who knows? I mean, it's again, this is obviously just theory crafting. And at the end of the day, I mean, we have no way to truly simulate or show this build off in terms of how it would work. So, but anyway, I think that's enough of me wailing on this target dummy. Let me tab over to the actual build that I would recommend using for Handed Enhancement Shaman. And like I said, again, this is quite possibly a build that, you know, I do think could work in the long run. I do think that it could be viable. I mean, I think, yes, you know, I mean, obviously, currently with the current tuning of things, it's going to be a little bit slower, which I think is why there's less DPS than dual wielding currently if we remove even if we remove the abilities where there's problems. But I think in the long run, this isn't really anything that's going to need to be worried about if they were to implement allow enhancement to use two-handed weapons and fix those abilities to where they did not restrict you to dual wielding. I didn't showcase this over when I was in the game, but I can safely tell you that even simply just having a one-handed weapon equipped is not going to let you use those abilities. They completely lock you into dual wielding. You have to have a weapon in both hands. So, anyway, you know, as I was kind of saying with this build, I mean, this side of the tree is not so important, although I would really focus on air totems above all, because again, the main premise of this build is really, it plays on that enhancement theme, but it also plays on the fact that in enhancement's ascendance form, you become an air ascendant, and so air is really your best friend here. Especially as a two-handed weapon wielder, it's going to be very important because your wind-based abilities are what's going to allow you to hit faster, especially with two-handed weapons. So, anyway, obviously, you know, we take Astral Shift for the because it's an enhancement. It's going to enhance your ability to take less damage. Wind Shear, so we have an interrupt. I choose Astral Bulwark over Planeswalker just simply because I think the additional damage reduction is going to be better than extended duration. I think 8 seconds is already okay. An additional 4 seconds at 40%. To me, that just doesn't do a whole lot. I mean, I know there's probably people that would prefer the 4 seconds, but again, it's more of a preference. A lot of these abilities, you can mix and match them. A lot of them are not going to be necessarily required for any particular build. I would personally go Thunderous Pause, and that's because later on you can obviously take Gust of Wind anyway. Capacitor Totem, that's going to be a stun. Guardian's Cudgel is going to automatically let you drop another Capacitor Totem when your first is either destroyed or expires. Tremor Totem, always a good pick. It's going to help you remove Fear, Charm, and Sleep effects from party members. Windrush Totem, again, this choice note is really dependent on your preferences and what your purpose is. Windrush Totem's obviously going to make you and your allies faster. Earth Grab is going to slow enemies. Ultimately up to you there. You want Nature's Guardian, that's going to obviously heal you when you drop below 35% of your health. Totemic Projection. This is going to let you relocate your active totems. Totemic Focus is obviously going to increase the radius of your totems. Keep in mind, as enhancement, you are a totemic warrior. So again, you really want your totems. You want to make sure you have them. And you want to make sure that you can effectively use those totems as necessary. Poison Cleansing Totem, useful. It's going to help you cleanse poisons from you and your allies. Tranquil Air Totem, again, this is another choice that's largely dependent. That's going to be largely situational. I think Tranquil Air is going to give you better mileage overall, just simply because there's not really a lot of there's not really a lot of situations where you're going to need it, but the part of the problem with Stone Skin Totem is, while it gives you a physical reduction, it only applies to you and 4 allies. So it's probably both of these abilities only apply to you and your 4 closest allies. So really, these two totems are probably best in these two totems here are going to be largely dependent on your circumstances. Do you need the additional damage reduction, and do you need the pushback reduction and to reduce the effects of incoming interrupt attacks? Personally, I think, again, Tranquil Air is the better choice, because there's already so much that can be done to reduce you and your allies' damage intake. So obviously you want your Surging Shields. This is going to increase the damage of your Lightning Shield. And it also causes your Lightning Shield to trigger Maelstrom, your Maelstrom weapon as well. Totemic Recall. You could also go into Call of the Elements or Creation Core. Again, it's mainly situational, and it's going to just depend on what you need. Obviously, we have Gust of Wind. This is a movement speed. I did notice when the Twins of Valakir, but I did notice with Gust of Wind, there is the animation is garbage. I don't know who was responsible for the testing of this ability, but basically you hear a wind sound and you just see your character lunge forward. Like, it's stupid. There's no wind animation or anything there, and so it's just, it needs work. You should have the wind animation or something there, and I'm pretty sure this is based on either a toy or some other ability or something from a previous expansion, where there was actually a wind animation on it. So if Blizzard sees this, again, not only should you guys consider allowing enhancement to wield two-handed weapons and removing the dual flag on the various abilities that have it currently, but also make sure we're getting these animations fixed. It doesn't look good, guys. So anyway, and there's another ability I'll go over this on also that just, and it's even worse because not only is there no sound effect, there's nothing to indicate that you even use the ability. Basically, you use the ability goes on cooldown. There's no sound effect, animation, nothing, and that's actually the Doomwind's ability. When you use Doomwinds, there's absolutely no indication that you've used it. The buff appears in the top corner as it should, but sadly, it doesn't do a whole lot of damage. If you actually were to go in and look at the damage that Doomwinds is actually doing, it's not actually doing a whole lot of your damage. It does next to nothing still. But like I said, there's no animation, no sound effect, no indication that you've used the ability. And so, again, yeah, if you see this video, Blizzard, you need to get on that and fix the animations for some of these abilities. Shaman isn't the only class that has some of these problems. I mean, I main Ret Paladin, and honestly don't even want to main it because it just doesn't seem fun to play anymore, given the changes that they've made. And one thing that annoys me is, and it's possible they fixed this by now. I haven't really checked or anything recently. It's been a little bit, but the new Radiant Decree ability used to be called in earlier betas and alpha was called Path of Ruin, and or something like that. And for whatever reason, there's a passive effect that improves the damage of that. They didn't even bother to fix the tooltip and rename it Radiant Decree in the improvements in the improvement talents ability. And so when I was testing it out, I wasn't even sure if it was going to actually proc on Radiant Decree. I mean, luckily the ability, it works as it's supposed to. It's just, for whatever reason, they somehow missed the fact that they hadn't updated the tooltip to reflect the new name of the ability. So anyway, so yeah, I mean, this is obviously going to be something you can choose differently. Spirit Walk is arguably another good ability. Part of the reason why I prefer Gust of Wind is because it has a shorter cooldown, and again, it's another gap closer. So I'm going to use as another gap closer. And again, if you take Thunderous Pause, you really don't need Spirit Walk. Go with the Flow is going to reduce the cooldown on whichever ability you took here. Totemic Recall. Totemic Recall is kind of an iconic ability, as is Call of the Elements, but as you can see, they actually work very differently in this expansion. They've completely reworked Totemic Recall and Totemic in Call of the Elements. Historically, Call of the Elements placed... originally, I should say, Call of the Elements was an ability that would place up to 4 totems down at a time, and then Totemic Recall would actually despawn those totems and return a portion of the mana to you. Instead, Totemic Recall actually now resets the cooldown of the most recently used totem, and Call of the Elements now reduces the cooldown of Totemic Recall by 60 seconds, allowing you to use it on a 2-minute timer instead of a 3-minute timer. Creation Core basically modifies that so that it affects, so your Totemic Recall affects 2 totems instead of 1. Again, a lot of this is situational. This side, I think, your class tree is largely not as important as the spec tree. Obviously, like I said, you want to take Frost Shock. Frost Shock is basically mandatory. Focused Insight is mandatory. Flurry is mandatory. Brimming with Life is also going to be very good because it's going to allow your reincarnation to increase your health when it's off cooldown, but also if you're at full health, allow it to cool down 75% faster, which is really good. So anyway, over here, obviously you take your Storm Strike. For the two-handed build, like I was saying, the biggest changes are going to be you're losing Lava Lash and Molten Salt. and instead you're going to focus on your wind and air based abilities. So Wind Fury Weapon, Forceful Winds, Unruly Winds, Doom Winds, obviously. Doom Winds, again, is another ability that currently does not work with two-handed weapons, requiring dual wield. Feral Lunge is, again, a really good gap closer. I don't think it's really going to matter what build you have. I would personally recommend taking it in all cases, unless, of course, obviously the damage sims say otherwise. At this time, I really haven't taken much time to go and look at the recommended builds on Icy Veins or even Wowhead for that matter. Again, like I said, I just want to kind of put this out there as a bit of a theory and kind of show that the talents are definitely there if the abilities are modified to allow whatever. And again, I think the other big issue, like I said, as people have pointed out, Blizzard needs to add the items to the game so that there are weapons. Do something about the weapons issue. That's the other thing Blizzard would have to do to make this build workable. Obviously, using heirloom weapons is not going to be an ideal solution. I mean, even if you have your heirloom weapons maxed out and they work up to max level, the problem you're running into there is at some point after you reach max level, you're not going to want to be locked into your heirloom weapon. Because obviously, again, those are just meant for leveling. They're meant to get you to max level and until you can get a better weapon at max level. So obviously you have your Sundering ability. That's pretty standard. You have all your improved Maelstrom and your abilities that help you improve more Maelstrom. Crash Lightning, again, I explained earlier, this is the ability that really indicates that two-handed Enhancement Shaman was at least considered. It has been considered, and ultimately either, ultimately they obviously scrapped it, so, but who knows? I mean, again, if they simply remove the dual wield flag on a few abilities, I can totally see it working the way it's supposed to. Ice Strike, obviously, as pointed out, they're gonna have to now remove the flag on that ability. I might be wrong, but I am pretty sure that prior to Tuesday's patch, this ability did work with two-handed weapons. Obviously, your Wind Fury Totem, that's vital again. It's going to obviously allow you to hit faster. Again, very important when you're wielding two-handed weapons. Storm Flurry, obviously going to be important because it's going to allow your Storm Strike to strike target an additional time. Crashing Storms. I would say Crashing Storms and Converging Storms. You can take one or the other. And it's largely going to be dependent on your situation. If you're going more single target, then Converging Storms would be the better option. If you're, Mythic Plus, you have a lot of enemies, then obviously Crashing Storms. You obviously want your elemental weapons. Elemental weapons has always been kind of a staple of the whole Enhancement Shaman thing. Storm Blast, that's going to empower your Storm Strikes. And this is where it starts to get interesting. I obviously ignore this side of the tree. I just do not think that Primordial Wave really fits the enhancement aesthetic. I would see that more for being a elemental or a restoration ability. And before anybody sits there and says, oh, well, what about, Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning? Obviously, you've got spells there. It's just, again, there's also nothing that really plays on this, in my opinion. It doesn't really play nice with the rest of these abilities. And it's largely unnecessary, considering you can take Feral Spirits and obviously improve those even going down to elemental spirits or alpha wolf. And honestly, I would say that this is going to be largely dependent on your. This is going to be largely dependent on what your usage is. If you want to go, if you're say for instance, going for an AoE build with crashing storms, Alpha Wolf is the better option. It's going to allow your feral spirits to attack all nearby enemies when you cast Chain Lightning and Crash Lightning. And so basically it's going to turn your feral spirits into an AoE ability. Whereas again, if you want single target, you go Converging Storms and Elemental Spirits, which is going to obviously imbue those wolves with an element. Elemental Assault. Some people might be like, well, why not take Legacy of the Frost Witch? Well, again, the problem is there's just not enough talent points. Someone might opt to take something like maybe get rid of maybe theoretically get rid of elemental weapons or something, to exchange that. But I mean, I don't know if you're really going to need that. Over here, obviously, we've gotten the deeply rooted elements. This is largely going to be preferential. The reason I obviously want to put Ascendance in this build is because I think Thorm's Invocation is a perfect ability, especially for a two-handed Enhancement Shaman. I mean, if you really think about it, you're kind of invoking the power of Thorm. And again, if you have seen Thorm in game, Thorm basically wields a massive two-handed mace. Or arguably a two-handed mace. I mean, you gotta understand, the guy's a Titan, or a Titan construct. And so it would definitely be two-handed to any shaman that was actually wielding it. So, I think, I mean, the reason why I would obviously go deeply rooted elements is because this is going to remove a button from your action bar. So, and so basically this is going to turn, this is kind of like the Paladin ability that lets you basically lets you use Seraphim as a proc. And so basically, depending on what you do, you're going to proc Seraphim. It's basically the same principle here. Your Storm Strike has a chance to activate Ascendance. And so and so basically you're gonna transform into an Air Ascendant, which is gonna replace your Storm Strike with Wind Strike, and Wind Strike is actually a ranged attack. So so basically, again, like I said, you're really playing on the wind theme, which is why you really want to focus on a lot of wind totems and air totems and wind and air abilities, in my opinion, because it just all goes perfectly. I mean, consider yourself the Fury of the Storm, if you will, or an avatar of the storm. And that's really, I think, what enhancement really does well. I would really argue that each spec really does a good job of exemplifying one of the elements over the others. Restoration Shaman focuses a lot on water, mixing in some earth abilities. Elemental really focuses a lot on fire, mixing in some of the storm abilities. Enhancement is, again, really good at focusing on storm abilities with some fire and even some earth in there. But like I said, I mean, to me, each spec really has its own primary element, and again, that's water for restoration, fire for elemental, and storm for storm, or wind/air for enhancement. And so again, I just think, I mean, this whole thing goes really well because then you actually call upon the Titan construct, who really does, draw on storm abilities, lightning abilities, and stuff like that. So I think, all in all, that's a really good, this would be a really good build for a two-handed enhancement shaman. Again, this choice node, it's really preferential. I mean, do you want an ability on a 3-minute cooldown, or do you want to have access to that same ability as a passive proc that basically just has the ability to proc for a shorter period of time off your Storm Strike? I mean, again, I think this is going to largely be dependent on the sims. I mean, again, it's really, a lot of RNG, but again, I think depending on how well that sims and stuff, the RNG may be worth it. I know playing around with my shaman, I mean, not my shaman, but my paladin, and kind of going over that, the ability that procs the Seraphim ability, I'm honestly surprised at how much time I spend in Seraphim. I feel like I spend more time in Seraphim with it as a passive proc than I do actually having the ability on a cooldown. And so, that was actually very fun back in Shadowlands, running through Torghast with that, Torghast power that actually allowed that also. So I'm glad they ultimately brought that into the game officially as a more or less as a, well, arguably a mechanic that you can talent into. Because like I said, I mean, it's a lot of fun. Like I said, the uptime of Seraphim is just ridiculous. And I would imagine that the uptime of Ascendance would be about the same for an Enhancement Shaman. So anyway, one last thing I kind of want to go over, and this is really something I think Blizzard needs to look at, because this is absolutely pathetic. This is stupid. I don't know how they overlooked this when they were creating the starter build, but here we go. Here is the starter build for Enhancement Shaman. I'm not sure if anybody sees it offhand. I'll give you a little hint. It's in the enhancement talent. It's in the enhancement shaman tree. I kind of hinted at it earlier. It's this right here. This ability makes no sense given the talents that they have provided as the in the default talent tree. It makes no sense at all. This ability does absolutely nothing for the starter build. And really, they would have been better off giving you. They would have been better off giving you. Wind Fury Totem, because Wind Fury Totem would have definitely given you that same proc. Would have given you the same ability to access Storm Flurry. Basically, I mean, with the way they've done this, they give you Swirling Maelstrom as what's clearly a filler talent, just to give you Storm Fury. And again, that's highly unnecessary when you could just give them something that they can use, being Wind Fury Totem, which also unlocks Storm Flurry. So again, I think it's highly odd that Blizzard went through all this work to create this starter build, but yet clearly overlooked the fact that Swirling Maelstrom does absolutely nothing unless you take Hailstorm or Fire Nova. Doesn't matter which, I mean, it will proc off of both of them, but it's absolutely worthless in a build that doesn't have either Hailstorm or Fire Nova. And so for a starter build that's not using either of them, it ultimately makes more sense to use a Wind Fury totem and then connect you to the Storm Flurry. This, again, makes absolutely no sense. And Blizzard, again, if you do see this video, look into fixing this before, you know, I mean, I doubt you guys are going to get around to it before Dragonflight goes live, but, you know, I've commented and said things a lot of times about how there's just a lot of things that aren't really good. I mean, you know, another thing that's not very good, I mean, I love the interface. I love what they're doing with it. I do see it very much so as a work in progress, though. Something that I've started to get a little used to, but still bugs me a little bit, is these close buttons are still too big for the title bar. As you can kind of see, it's actually too tall for the title bar. The top of it actually goes above the title bar if you look close enough. And these tabs, I think they're nice, but I still think those could use some work. I mean, they don't really. I mean, they look nice, but I think that's just that might be a little more nitpicky. But yeah, I mean, these right here are my biggest issue. This right here is my biggest issue. That is too tall for that. And so I just. It would be nice if, you know, they fixed that. You know, perhaps just, you know, gave us, you know, even maybe updated the game menu and replaced all these red buttons. These, like, it's fine in these places, in some places, but I really do think what they need to do is just eliminate all of these old, like, red buttons over here, this button, this here, and replace them with something more in line with what they've got for these. This here, or like this, you know, the new arrow style, the new, you know, drop down menus and stuff. You know, again, like I said, I mean, I might be a little nitpicky. Overall, I think it looks good, but I do think that, like I said, these aspects of the old UI are dated and don't really fit the best with the new UI. So anyway, you know, that's just my take. I think I think Dragonflight still needs quite a bit of polish. I still think that, you know, I think we're getting there. I think it's getting there. I just, again, think that it would benefit from some additional polish. And, you know, it just needs a little more work. I definitely do not think that it was ready for even to go live on pre-patch. I think a lot of people would have been happy if Blizzard said, "Hey, yeah, you know, we need to give it a little more time. We need to do some more polishing." They did that with Shadowlands. People were a bit more happy that they did that. You know, people want a game that is complete, not a game that's a work in progress. So anyway, with that said, you guys have kind of seen my my overall thoughts on the you know, my overall theory crafting ideas on the concept of a two-handed enhancement shaman. Let me know what you guys think. I mean, if there's any ways to possibly improve the theory, or improve how two-handed enhancement shaman would work, you know, feel free to let me know. I mean, drop a comment, you know, whatever. But you know, for now, this is basically the best that we can do when we're looking at this build, because sadly some abilities just don't work. But as stated before, I do believe that if those abilities were working with two-handed weapons, the damage would be about the same. It's not going to be that much of a drop. I mean, so anyway, you know, let me know what you guys think, and thank you guys.